I just want to introduce myself. CJ Dietzman here. I've been a practitioner and leader in cybersecurity since before we called it cybersecurity, right? Back in the day. But really good to be talking to you guys in all seriousness. I've been working in the realm of governance, risk, security, digital forensics, incident response for a very long time. I really enjoy it. I love working with clients on complex cybersecurity issues, and I'm currently with Strauss Freeburg, which is now under the AON umbrella. So really good to be chatting with you guys today. I promise I won't talk at you with slides. I promise I won't give you a sales pitch or any of that other stuff. I'm a practitioner in my heart of hearts. So we're just going to talk a bit about mitigating some of these key cyber risk and threats with very pragmatic, intangible and specific thoughts and ideas and things that I've seen work in other organizations. So let's go ahead and jump in. And this is that slide, that pesky slide that wasn't building directly for us, but my friend Ron is building it up here. Just want to talk a bit, if you can keep clicking, Ron. I don't know why those other graphics aren't coming up. There we go. Let's just quickly talk about sort of setting the table, so to speak, around what these key cyber risks and threats are. And I'm sure you've talked about some of these today, but certainly ransomware, malware, so significant. The past 24 months of my life and a lot of my clients' organizations have been significantly impacted by ransomware. And we're going to look at another slide here, which will talk a bit more about exactly how large this ransomware issue is. But let's not forget about some of these other things. Resource constraints. If I think about organizations in 2021 dealing with cybersecurity, dealing with threats, constraints around talent and resource and budget are huge. Certainly third parties, phishing, business email compromise, malicious insiders, the Internet of Things and innovation, account takeovers, legacy infrastructure. These are just some of the drivers, and you can see some of these other metrics across the bottom of the screen, but really whetting our appetite a bit for what some of these key cyber risk and threat considerations are. Please, if you don't mind, Ron, go ahead and advance. So, I work for AON, and AON does a lot of different things. I happen to be in our cybersecurity consulting practice, but we also are insurance brokers, our firm. And so we've got sort of some of the benefits of looking at data coming from the cyber insurance market. And when I was talking to Ron about key data and metrics we might want to pull into our discussion today, this sort of enables you to look at claims coming out of ransomware. Are you kidding me? Ransomware claims are up nearly 500%, 2018 to 2020. It's wild. Look at that graphic. It kind of tells the story. AON cyber claims intakes in 2020 show an increase, compounding increase of 150%, 300% over the trailing 2 years. So, to say that the story of the past year to two around cybersecurity includes a story about ransomware threats is an understatement, isn't it? We can't really talk about cybersecurity threats and risk for enterprises without discussing ransomware. So I'm going to focus a bit of my discussion, the few minutes that I have, about tactical and tangible and specific ways that you can mitigate ransomware risk. Some of these things are applicable to other cyber risks and threats, but let's talk a bit about ransomware because I think it's so relevant to many of your organizations. Let's keep going. Listen, I just got done telling you that I'm not an insurance broker by trade, but let's talk about insurance again. I'm just kidding. Listen, I promise I won't read this entire slide to you, but feel free to digest it. All I want to let you know, and my insurance practitioners, my insurance broker colleagues, I hear them say it all the time. Right now, we're dealing with a hard cyber insurance market. The market has changed significantly, driven heavily, no surprise, by just the massive volume of ransomware-related claims and malware-related claims over the past couple of years. So the only thing that I really want you to know about this slide, and feel free to take a snapshot of it or what have you, is that the cyber insurance market is a hard one, which means that these underwriters are taking a hard look at who they're writing cyber insurance for, and they're taking a hard look at how you're mitigating your risks. So let's go ahead and advance, please. Thank you. So how can we mitigate some of these ransomware threats and risks? Well, let's look at the attack vectors. When we look at the anatomy of a ransomware attack, let's talk about 3 critical vectors that we must consider. Phishing emails. There's typically a phishing email involved, not always, but quite often when we do our investigation and analysis, our digital forensics, our incident response teams, to gain access to legitimate credentials and or to deploy weaponized attachments. So, we can immediately, well, let me say this first, right? In all of the ransomware cases that I manage in investigations and response matters, too often when my clients, when I talk to them and their head hits the pillow at night, you say, wow, if we had these 2 or 3 things in place, the probability of this ransomware attack and the magnitude of the attack would probably have been greatly, greatly reduced. And one of those things is to prevent and detect malicious emails. So whether it's Office 365 or other email solution, we've got to look there. More on that in a moment. Look at mail filters and spam filters. Now, many folks on this call may be saying, well, CJ, we've been doing that for years. Yeah, but we've got to make sure that we're tuning those services, that our service providers and our vendors are really doing, they're giving us the optimal versions and the versions of those service offerings and products, but then we're also doing the right tuning and config. And then, of course, multi-factor authentication, MFA, for those email services. It's not a silver bullet, but it significantly reduces the probability and the magnitude of compromises in email. Remote access solutions. Again, I just had a client 2 weeks ago, guys, kind of hard to believe, but just 2 weeks ago, a fairly, mid-market client who had a compromised VPN remote access solution that was not using things like multi-factor authentication. They were still relying on usernames and passwords, fairly weak usernames and passwords, unfortunately, and they were compromised. They had bad actors on their remote access solution, bad actors dialing in, quote unquote, to the network. So we need to look at securing those, secure the remote access, deploy multi-factor authentication. Let's make sure those endpoints that, the last mile, if you will, between your network and the end user sitting in his or her chair is that endpoint. It's that laptop. It's that desktop. So we need to make sure that we harden them, and we've got things like EDR solutions in place. The device vulnerabilities near the network edge. There's nothing new under the sun. We were talking about vulnerability management 10, 15, 20 years ago. It is crucial today. Core blocking and tackling for cybersecurity. We need to make sure that we're doing the right things to identify, analyze, mitigate, and compensate for vulnerabilities in our network. Let's go ahead and advance. Again, just a few minutes left here. And please, Ron, keep me honest with my timeline and let me know when we're up. But, another way of looking at some of the same things, the ransomware attack vector and kill chain. Let's look at the recon, the weaponization delivery, the exploits, the install of the malicious software, establishing command and control, and then the actions that the malicious actor takes. Now, on the backside of each of these, we can talk about some of these compensating controls and mitigating factors that we can put in place. But in order to really mitigate the threat, we must, of course, understand the threat. We must understand the process by which a lot of these threat actors are compromising these environments. So again, I won't burn through this entire diagram, but you can see this is what it typically looks like, culminating in the extortion on the far right. Let's get ahead of that. Let's look at the email vector, the remote access, the technical vulnerabilities. If we harden these vectors, we can't necessarily eliminate the risk and block 100% of the threats, but we can greatly tip the scales in our favor. All right, let's advance. So again, looking at each of these, how do we offset those top concerns? And you see a reference here to the AON RSA. That's the ransomware supplemental. It's part of a cyber insurance application. But again, this is not an insurance-oriented dialogue. But it is such a big part of sort of that taxonomy where we put controls in place, we accept some of the risk, we mitigate some of the risk, but then there's risk that we may want to transfer. So it's relevant to this business discussion about cybersecurity. And what we're finding, what's developed is that, these, as I mentioned, these underwriters are super interested in what you're doing around cybersecurity. So we've got supplemental, ransomware supplemental that we have our clients fill out when they're going through the cyber insurance process. And that maps back to critical controls around email security, around access management, logical security, network security, endpoint protection, business resilience. These are sort of the big five. If I think about the ransomware threat, and I think about not only where underwriters and insurance companies are sort of mandating that you guys focus, but where you'll get the best bang for your buck to mitigate these risks and threats. And you could argue some others as well, but these are certainly at the core. These are the tenets. And of course, recommended actions. Let's talk about how do we bolster email security? We've got to bolster human interact. We've got to enhance and change human behavior. Phishing simulations. We've got to look at email configuration. We've got to look at Microsoft O365 if we use it. We've got to look at Windows Active Directory, domain controllers, privileged access management, vulnerability scanning for the network, threat hunting. I did about 35 active threat hunts last year, proactive threat hunts for my clients, where we leveraged our digital forensics team and some of their tools to go out and look at their Office 365, look at their endpoints, look at their email environments, look across their network to see if there were any active indicators of compromise. And I'm not kidding you. It's not a scare tactic. It's just just as I was speaking to a friend, I'll speak to you guys. About 70% of the organizations I worked with where I did threat hunts, I found active indicators of compromise. Some, not all of them were, hey, Rome's burning the platforms on fire. Some of them were lower priority, but we found indications of compromised mailboxes, indications of, dormant or sometimes active malware running on workstations. The organization had zero visibility into it. So these are really important things for you to consider if you're not already doing. And of course, resilience. When and if the organization has a really bad day, having, an incident response plan, being able to recover and operationally restore systems around backup. Even though you say, well, CJ, we've been doing backups and recovery since the year 2000. Yeah, but I got to tell you, a lot of my clients in the past couple of years, when it comes to ransomware and other malware, they have not been able to recover. So you got to take a fresh look at your backup routines, your backup controls, your technologies. Make sure they will enable you to meet your need, again, when you have a really bad day. Ron, how are we doing on time?
We're doing fine. I think it's interesting just to put this in a little bit of context. We had a number of similar talks. We had people, talk about data protection, backup, recovering your backups. We know before talk about the importance of training, dealing with the human element, variety of things. Just so everyone understands this incredibly terrible problem, what CJ and the AON organization represents is another piece of the puzzle, because what CJ and his team does is provide the services to configure, let's say, the backup solution we heard about from Trilio. We heard about, the Huntress solution for identifying with their niche services to identifying malware that might be Trojan horses. But what CJ and AON can do is provide a more holistic across every single threat vector to provide a more integrated solution to come up and stop vulnerabilities that some of the other solutions we heard about today don't necessarily cover, because CJ is not selling products per se, more services. Just to put in context, and you could discuss some of your solutions where you made that happen.
Sure.
As we
yeah, thank you so much for that, Ron. Well said. And if you advance, now that we talked about the problem, as Ron said, let's talk a little, and we touched on some of the solutions, but I just want to touch on this slide briefly, and it's just an example, but to give you a feel, there is no silver bullet. It really takes an integrated, holistic approach, a risk-based approach, And it's not about any one product or service. In my experience working in cybersecurity, certainly dealing with ransomware threats would be the same. You need to look at sort of a strategy, a series of projects and tactics and methods, and ultimately controls, proactive, reactive, and detective in nature, to enable you to meet your security objectives. So the pinwheel on the screen right now, I'm not going to read that eye chart to you, but I wanted to share it with you just as an example for what we're talking about and the type of thing we help our clients put together. Let's jump ahead and next slide and next one. You know, and this, for example, the ransomware readiness bundle, this is what I was talking about earlier. And oh, you know what? If you go to the next one, let's look at the, Ron, there you go, Ron, that's a good one. So what we'll do, and just with all this aggregate experience as AON Cyber Solutions and the digital forensics incident response work we've done over the years, we've established this broader consulting capability, as Ron was mentioning, where we assist our clients proactively with process, procedure, controls, assessment, analysis, remediation. We put together a ransomware bundle where effectively we look at all the things I mentioned, all the things where we saw our clients stumble and fall down, all the areas where we had to help those organizations bolster these controls. We pulled the best of that together to put together sort of an accelerated, low-cost, lightweight offering that can really help organizations jumpstart their readiness and resilience in the face of ransomware threats. And it includes some Active Directory scanning and analysis and remediation, includes some vulnerability scanning, analysis and remediation. We do the threat hunting. We'll go out and look for active indicators of compromise, leveraging various tools. We're sort of independent. We don't sell software. We're consultants by trade and capability, professional services, so to speak. We use various different tools, proprietary and some commercial, and our own methodologies to look for active threats across the environment. We also provide subject matter expertise and advice through our advisory practice. We also have a threat intelligence team that does some hunting into the deep, dark web, looking for chatter, noise in the system, evidence of compromised credentials, compromised intellectual property. We bundle all of this up and present to our clients sort of where they're at today, give them some very tactical, tangible, and specific recommendations on where they need to remediate right now. In some cases, we're finding some stuff that's kind of burning platform. You've got an issue here. In other cases, it's more, you know what, you're sitting okay in the water, but could be a lot better. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Excuse me. Again, I was moving quickly here, I know, but I really wanted to cover some of these key things. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
No, it's very good. I think if you could just summarize, if you can, because we want to bring up our Microsoft speaker, but maybe if you've got a good, like, one specific customer example you want to conclude with, CJ, on how you've made all this work.
I would say one that comes to mind just, and it's one, but there are various others. I was doing we were called in through a private equity client that had various portfolio companies. Long story short, we were engaged for a digital forensic and incident response matter. They believed they had one or two mailboxes compromised. Well, they were right. They had one or two, but by going in there, leveraging this proprietary methodology around Office 365 to do sort of accelerated analysis of the mailbox environment, we found out that there were dozens of compromised mailboxes. They believed they had a couple of nefarious mail forwarding rules, these sort of blind auto forward rules and malicious filters. They actually had dozens of mailboxes with dozens and dozens of mail forwarding rules, mailboxes that were being replicated offline, mail filters that were set up. Not all of these enabled the threat actor to successfully perpetrate wire fraud, which is what they were looking to do. They're looking to get money out the door through compromising vendors and service provider information, etc. Long story short, the threat actor was successful, but the potential was actually much greater, and the compromise was much greater. So I guess the key soundbite from that story is, what may look like, a fairly small compromise that technology teams are very quick. To their credit, they want to diagnose, they want to get to the heart of the matter, they want to restore normal business operations. I get it. I grew up as a technology person, but let's not ready, fire, aim, right? Let's not, let's learn the lesson from the Titanic, where what else is sticking out, what's sticking out of the water versus what lies beneath. And unfortunately, in the cases of these threat actors, in the cases of these ransomware attacks and business email compromise, we're seeing that it's what lies beneath that may cause a massive legal storm beyond the minor squall or the minor storm that you may have from a technology standpoint. So,
Okay.
that's what we're here for. That's where and how we help our clients. And I'm just really grateful that I had a chance to talk to you all today. And I'd love to speak to you guys again sometime. Thank you.
Good.